Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. I'm going to show you how to take this Dollar Tree wooden box and turn it into a vintage container with a see-through glass top. The ones that I found at the Dollar Tree had these funky little house cutouts. This didn't really fit the design I wanted to go with. If you're trying to alter this box, you could just stick a label over it, but it's very thin. You should be able to kind of gauge at the thickness of the wood, and if it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, then you should have no problem cutting out this frame with a regular box cutter. I'm going to use my utility knife. You want to make sure that it's really sharp. So the first thing I did was to measure a border. I gave myself a 1/2 inch because this box overhangs just quite a bit. I'm just going to go ahead and put in a pencil line at my 1/2 inch. All right, now I'm going to use my ruler as a straight edge, and I'm going to very gently score around where my line was. So I'm scoring, taking just a thin cut. Then I'm going to go in and take another pass, a little bit stronger. Watch your fingers. You don't want to cut yourself. You're going to need to taking multiple passes in order to get this fully cut through. Okay, once I've got a decent amount of scoring, I can remove my ruler and then just go ahead and work on the box. And there we go. So you can just take some sandpaper and clean up the edge a little bit. So the next step is going to be to stain your box. I'm just going to use a traditional wood stain, but you could use a watered down acrylic. The watered down acrylic would certainly dry a lot faster than the wood stains, depending on, how much time and effort you want to put into your project. I like to layer my colors. Layering stains creates a little bit more depth. I just think that I end up with a better result. Whenever you are staining, you are going to want to make sure you wear some gloves and some old clothes. I like to ply with a brush and then wipe off the excess with a cloth. I give it a couple minutes to penetrate and then I'll go back in and wipe it down. I tend to use mostly just colorants and then go ahead and give a gloss finish at the end. I don't like using ones that have polyurethane because it's going to create a blocking action. If you are going to use these for treat boxes, you want to be doing this way in advance and give it a really good time to air out and cure. So I'm going to apply this first layer on, and I'm not going to wait for it to fully dry, and then I'm going to come in with the second color. I don't find that you need to wait when it comes to layering. Only thing I would recommend is pour the next color into something else and work from there, so that way you're not contaminating your entire pot. I was not really happy with the way that the two coats look. It's not red enough for me. This is now my third coating. These did dry completely overnight. I don't have to worry about contaminating my container. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I'm finally happy with the color. Today is an incredibly hot day, so these were outside cooking in the sun for several hours. Usually I like to give these things a 24-hour set, but I'm pressed for time as always here in the studio. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply my top coat, which is going to seal my stain in, and I'm just applying some of this tung oil. So I'm gonna go and give these two coats, then it'll fully cure overnight and I'm good to go. Now, if you don't want to deal with cutting glass, there are small hardware stores that will cut glass for you. You could also use an acrylic, which is a sheet of plastic, or you could just use a clear plastic film that you could tape to the inside. But because I want this to be as authentic looking as I possibly can make it, I am going to use some real glass that I'm going to be soldering. And you can get glass cutters for 10 bucks at the hardware, like Home Depot has them, and they have a little reel here that rolls around and that scores your glass. And then I'm just using a pair of glass pliers that have a little bit of a bevel around the edge. You don't have to use these. Usually when you do the scoring and you give the glass a little tap, it'll actually break for you. You can get by with doing a simple project like this, just tap on the underside of the glass. You usually want a cutting table, and if you buy the version of the waffle that they sell for cutting glass, it's really expensive. So instead, this is waffle for fluorescent lights, and it was something like 10 bucks for double the size. When you cut your glass on it, the little bits of glass kind of fall in between the crack, and it makes it easier for you to make your cut. Your cutter does have a little bit of a gap, so when you're doing your measurement, you'll want to measure the width between the scoring head and the edge so you can get accurate cuts. I will be wearing some goggles. I'm gonna have to move the cat. Okay, safety glasses on, and I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from my line, and I'm gonna hold my ruler down as my guide, and I'm just putting a small amount of pressure, and you'll hear a scraping. That means it's scoring. And I have some scoring oil. You don't need it often, 10 to 15 cuts. I dip my roller in it. I'm gonna take my pliers and it. First cut is done. I go ahead and score the other cut. And that one came out pretty clean, but you may have a situation where your edges are a little bit jagged. I have a glass grinder to do this job, but glass grinders are very expensive. I have an alternative option for you if you are just going to be doing a couple small projects. Some waterproof sandpaper. It's made to be submerged in water, and I just have a tray with some water in it. Take your piece of glass and sand the edge. It is going to take some doing, but it does definitely get the job done. It'll smooth it out for you. You do want to be careful not to, grab and hold where the unfinished edge is. So I'm just kind of pinching around the center. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting, and I'm going to use my glass grinder because it's a lot faster. All right, it's time to get this glass attached. I've given myself a little bit of space because I'm going to be applying this copper foil tape. I've chosen to go with a 10mm, and I forgot to mention that the glass I'm using is just standard replacement glass for like windows. So it's super cheap. And then this stuff, copper tape that I ordered online, you can get this on Amazon. It's pretty cheap as well. And then I have my soldering iron and some solder and flux. Now, if you are just doing a one-off project, you can purchase a basic soldering kit from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever your hardware place is. This is a strip of tape that is copper with adhesive on it. I'm just gonna apply this tape to both my wood and to the glass. Center the tape along the middle rim of the lid. You should have an overhang on both the top and the bottom that you will fold down so that you have visible tape around the top of the rim, the inside edge, and the underside. Just using a pair of regular scissors to cut my foil. All right, and now before I fold over my corners, I'm just going to slice the corners. This will allow me to fold the corners over. Because this is an inside corner, I have these missing little bits, so I'm just going to cut a little piece of tape and stick it in there. Next thing is to take my fid and run it across here. If you don't have one of these, you can use the back end of a paintbrush, but basically I'm just burnishing this tape on. I'm going to repeat this process for my glass, but the glass is going to be a little easier because the tape will be on the outside. And I'm trying to make sure that I get the center. It's going to be way more obvious now because the glass is see-through if you don't have the tape centered. Now you can do this on top of a piece of plywood, but I just picked up the cheapest floor tile I could find because the stone won't pick up the heat and I don't have to worry about burning, and I do most of my soldering on top of here. So I'm just gonna lay my two pieces in, And I do have a gap, but that's okay. The solder will fill that in. I'm gonna throw on my safety glasses just in case. I'm gonna apply some flux to the tape. And I'm just gonna do this in a couple areas first, just to tack it down. All right, so you just tap the flux. And of course I moved my whole thing. You wanna be doing this in a well-ventilated area. Now to fill these larger gaps, sometimes I like to just cut pieces of my solder and lay them in there. So this is what I'm gonna do. But first, let me get my flux on here. I have a pair of wire cutters. I'm just gonna lay that in the gap and go ahead and touch it with my soldering knife. Okay, I did want to mention that when I do this, I'm usually wearing a respirator, so that's something you want to think about. I'm filling in some more of the flux. I'm going to go ahead and tap. Don't want to leave this in one spot for too long because I don't want to risk the glass falling through. And I can go in and clean it up afterwards by running the solder iron back over it. Okay, so I'm gonna do this off camera so that I can get my respirator on. And I'll just be taking a little bit of a soapy cloth with just some dish soap to go around the soldered areas and the glass. Then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna patina this to look a little bit more aged. This is pre-bought patina that is sold for stained glass, but I have made some of my own before with just some copper sulfate that you get from their nursery. I have just enough left in this bottle to finish out these pieces. Normally, if I wanted to use this, I'd be pouring it into a separate container so that I would not contaminate the batch, but there's so little left that I'm just gonna go ahead and use it right from here. If you were to go and apply this to this and then dump this back into your batch, you'd weaken the batch. So if you're purchasing this and you're using a full bottle, go ahead and pour it into a little cup or something before you apply it. When you wash this off, you want to make sure you remove any of the excess flux. If you leave any flux on it, the patina is not going to adhere. All you do though is paint it on. You just kind of apply it and then wipe it away. I like the aged copper look. That's kind of what I want to happen. This copper solution is adhering to your solder. So you can't go back and wash this, because if you go back and wash this with the soapy water, you're going to remove the patina that you just applied. And then my glass, take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and apply that with a piece of paper towel just to clean up the glass. And there you have it. I can go ahead and install one of these little label things and print out a label. Next step is to get these things filled with something good, some kind of good Halloween treat. I'm gonna work on that, and then I'm gonna show you what I've come up with. There were many different recipes for gummies on the internet, and they were all pretty much similar. This one I'm using is just to heat up some corn syrup and sugar until the sugar dissolves. Have a mixture of the gelatin with water ready to go to be mixed in, and then add some colorant and some drops of candy flavoring. I'm using Lorraine flavoring because I have a ton of them. You can go ahead and pour them into whatever mold you're using. I'm using this very cute little skeleton mold that I found from Joann Fabric. The gummies do need to set for a couple hours in the refrigerator, and once they are all said and done, you can pop them out and put them into your treat box. I'm gonna make some little pumpkin pasties. I actually have a video on how to make the pumpkin pie filling. That reminds me, if you are not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out. I have just some basic pie crust, and then I have filled pumpkin pie filling into this little squeeze bottle, and I have a pumpkin cookie cutter. I'm gonna just cut two, one for the top and one for the bottom. And then on one of them that's going to become the top, go ahead and press decorating tip or anything you can cut a little circle with. Flour liberally in the center there so that you can make sure the two pieces do not stick in the middle, but then run your finger with some water just along the edge. I'm also going to just take a little bit of extra dough, make a little P and stick it in the center, the side of your hole. That's just gonna help keep it raised. Now take your fork, gently press along your edges to seal it. And now you're gonna fill, and that's basically it. Skin a Granny Smith apple with a vegetable peeler. Use a melon baller to make small apple rounds. Try to avoid making flat areas. Sprinkle a little lemon juice to prevent browning. Cut some coffee stirrers into 2-inch long sticks. Pierce your apples with the sticks, keep any flat areas face down, and let air dry for about 10 minutes. Prep your caramel according to the directions. I used the microwave version, it turned out a little bit watery. I actually prefer the caramel sheets, but I could not find them in my grocery store. Dip your apples in the caramel, roll in some nuts or any other topping that you want, and then store them in the refrigerator for about a half an hour to fully set up. Alright you guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I did. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and I hope to see you soon.